All right, I'm just going to go live. Oh my gosh. We're going to go ahead and start. I don't know if this dude is going to show up where he's at. It's probably a little late. this guy. Am I live? Can you hear me? Jay's analysis running. Somebody said I was upset today. I'm not upset. I don't care what some chick thinks on the internet. I could care less. People love to talk smack on the internet, and then if you say, "Hey, some chick, come on, let's do something," then they run away. Now this dude, what's this? Clayton. Clayton said his first reply to the tweet says, "You don't debate, you argue." Okay. So, and he has what appears to be 30,000 followers on Twitter. So I said, "Come on, bro." And after about 16 tweets about what a debate is, debating what a debate is, he said he would be willing to debate Rome versus Orthodoxy. And he says he debates for a living. Okay, we'll see about that. So as you know, we always offer the challengers the opportunity to come on, but typically they don't. So I see Clayton, looks like he's coming into the room. So it looks like he is going to come on here.
Yeah, hang on a sec.
No hurry. So I said, "Come on, bro." After about 16 tweets. I need to turn down the audio.
I am. All right, how's that?
I can hear you good. Let's make sure the audience can you hear Clayton, everybody?
I'm trying to get the video on.
Okay, that's fine.
I just got caught right in the storm and everything rebooted.
Okay. Yeah, well, we had a storm here the other day, so I understand.
So it looks like I might be using a spud cam here.
A potato? What's a spud cam?
Yeah, I've got a real camera, a professional one, but it's not hooking up for some reason.
Okay.
Can you see anything at all?
Right now it's black.
Okay. Sorry, Doug.
It's okay. Now, I will say to the question in the chat while he's doing that, the reason that you don't want to read the Where book is because there's a section when he talks about the my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" That section, he makes a Nestorian statement. And then I talked about Where for a long time being problematic. And then, of course, he made some morally compromised statements last year, which was very expected if you had followed Where. And so, yeah, you need to stay away from the implicit Nestorianism in Orthodox way, because Jesus wasn't cut off from the Father. Jesus is a divine person. The second person of the Trinity could never be cut off from the Father. The expression, my God, why hast thou forsaken me," is explained by St. John Damascus in book 3 and 4 of On the Orthodox Faith, the death that he underwent in his humanity. The Son of God was not cut off from the Father because the only person present for all the actions there is the divine person of Christ. There's no human person in Christ. Do I have a Southern accent? I have a bit of a Southern accent because I am from the South. All right, we have a little bit of confusion.
You can see me now, right?
Mm-hmm. Sort of. You're a potato blur. So that's why you want to stay away from Where in the chat there. Have I actually debated a Catholic with a background in philosophy? Yes, I debated Dr. Feingold, who's a PhD in Thomism, and I had an introductory discussion with Classical Theist, well known on Twitter. So you can find those two debates. on my channel. Just Google them, look them up. Clayton, are you there? Looks like your mic's muted.
How about that?
Yep, I can hear you.
Right. God, that cam is bad, isn't it? Jesus, I just saw it on screen. What do you hear? What do you see?
A blurry Southern person.
It sucks because I've got a real camera. It's not coming on though, for whatever reason.
Okay, well you can
I have a professional camera.
Yeah, well you can be a blurry guy if you want, or you can. I'll keep talking and you can try to get the other one hooked up. Whatever you want to do.
No, yeah, we can. I mean, it's just not. I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, it's probably taking too long.
Okay.
It's because I'm on a laptop.
Now, you you're into politics. You talk about what you called lateralism. I did watch a little bit of your videos where you talked about what you think is a coherent political philosophy. Do you want to introduce people to your views and what you talk about and what you're into?
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, I created it's really just a system of compromises or workarounds for governments to use. And it's called lateralism. It is a whole system of government and economics. It was created from Venezuela back before they got into hyperinflation. Mm-hmm. But I go around to universities and stuff and do talks on economics and politics. But I'm also a monastic, and so I will discuss theology with people who actually talk about theology. I mean, I won't just talk to the random person on the street about it. But I mean, you seem legitimately interested, which is why I was asking you so many questions. I was trying to find out if that's what you do, you know, if you discuss theology or you just debate Christianity in general with people.
Well, I have probably, I don't know, 15, 20 debates with a wide range of atheists, pagans, vegans. We just did a Muslim debate the other day. So it kind of runs the gamut, and some of those are formal and some of them are informal, and I kind of let whoever wants to come on, they can choose whatever format they want to determine the debate. I don't care whether it's formal or informal, either way. So am I serious about it? Yeah, it's a big part of what I do, a big part of what I talk about. I have a lot of essays on theology. So yeah, I'm pretty serious about it. I regularly attend a Orthodox church. It's a canonical church. Yeah, I don't know what else to say, but it's not something that we do as a joke. It's not merely an intellectual exercise.
Oh, no, I didn't mean that. I just didn't know if you normally concentrated on the different denominations or what, or it's because every time I've seen you debate, it's been strictly defending Christianity in general. I've never actually seen you do a sort of a strict Roman, Catholic or Orthodox discussion before. That's what I was asking about.
There's a reason for that, and that's because most people are not willing to do it because they know they'll lose. And I'm not saying that in an arrogant way. It's just it's just a fact. So we had a very serious debate with Dr. Feingold on Thomism, and we had a very serious discussion with the classical theist, who's fairly well known on Twitter. So there's always an open floor. So I think between you and I, we talked about the differences between Roman Orthodoxy, and I was a little unclear about the stuff you were saying in the direct messages, because you said that you would agree, but you're also willing to debate it. So is that because you have issues with Francis, or what did you mean?
Oh, no. No, I like Francis. It's just like when they're on Warski Live, it's just a free for all argument. I can't stand it. I do like Warski, but I don't like it when they're trying to talk about something.
Okay, but I mean, Blood Sports was like maybe 2. I think I did Robert Taylor and JF. That's the only Blood Sports that I did debates.
Yeah, it was Blood Sports. Yeah, that's what I was saying. I didn't know if that's how you normally had done them. I watched part of that because it was like 3 hours, I think, or something. But I watched probably 30 or 40 minutes of it.
Okay. Today. Well, so now I already noticed a few funny things here. So first of all, before we get into discussing topics, like, do you want to? You actually like Pope Francis? I'll tell you what. You'll be the first person.
No. I'm talking about the JF or whatever, the French guy on.
No. I said Francis.
Pope Francis. I don't support Pope Francis.
Okay.
No. That's what I said. You're going to find some things odd because I don't support the current pope.
Okay.
I don't think he's legitimate. So that makes pretty much what I do illegitimate as far as the church is concerned at the moment. So that's why I said I'm a little on the outs with the church.
So now, when you say you don't think what he does is legitimate, does that mean you are a traditionalist, a sedevacantist, or what do you mean?
Yeah, a little bit of a Jesuit. The problem is that, and he is as well. But the problem is that
a little bit of a Jesuit.
Well, I'm not a Jesuit, but I like the traditional, trying to analyze yourself and against good and bad. And the thing about him is he really is a Jesuit, and I think he's a political assignment. I realize that's happened before, but I think he's a bad political assignment. I don't think he agrees with either the normal Catholic, traditions or any other for that matter. Well, he just goes his own way.
Well, I definitely agree with that. But now you say you're a monastic. Does that mean you're like a third order or a first order lay monastic or whatever they have in Rome?
Well, so I was a monk. I've left the order. I got married, have children, and I've created I have a monastery here that's more of it's not Catholic per se, even though I'm still Catholic. But
you have a monastery that's not really Catholic. What does that mean?
Well, it just means it's a Christian monastery. I mean, it's not unusual. I mean, you're shaking your head like it's unusual, but throughout South America and Africa, it's quite common.
Okay. Well, can you explain it, or does that not? I'm confused.
Well, no. I mean, it's just a Christian monastery. I mean, the thing about being, monastic practices is that you don't. It's all private. You know what I mean? You meditate on your own. You make discoveries on your own, and you might talk with the other monks, but it's not something you go out to public and discuss normally. I realize that there are monks who also have been priests, but that's not really what's going on. We just have a practice out, sort of excluded, and people do retreats there and things like that. But I don't preach. I don't give services. None of that.
Well, I mean, I understand there's a monastic and a priest. Not every monastic is ordained, but
right.
So in other words, are you saying you took some certain vows?
I've done some seminary, but I haven't finished anything.
Okay.
But
would you say you're a traditionalist or not?
I think I am, but compared to, say, an Orthodox like yourself, I'm not sure if you would agree.
Well, I'm talking in the world of
I don't believe in some of the more modern things. Like I don't. Whereas I don't have a problem with gay people necessarily individually. I don't believe that they should lead a church. I don't think they should be a priest. I don't think women should be a priest. So there's a lot of the traditional things that I hold to.
Okay.
I'm reading your comments. These guys are like saying it's getting weird. And I mean, it doesn't matter what I do. I mean, this is the problem. The comments. That's why I said it's going to be a difficult conversation because everybody wants to start crap. You know what I mean? I mean, you read your comments right now, you can see it.
Well, I mean, I got to focus on different things, so I can't just read the comments. But what I'm saying is, okay, in the world of Roman Catholicism, we're not talking about Orthodox right now, but in your world, do you identify with traditionalist groups like the Society of St. Pius X or a specific sedevacantist group, or do you know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about, but no, I don't agree with any of them necessarily. I just, what I mean? I'm not trying to follow any of the original orders. That's what we're trying to do, is make an order that's less strict. You know what I mean? That's what I'm trying to follow. I'm trying to create something new because the church is losing, huge amounts of following. Mm-hmm. They can't even get enough priests for the church. This is across Catholic, all the way across. They can't get enough priests to even do the diocese. They sure as hell can't get monks. So we're trying to create something different. So I mean, I don't really want to go into that. That's the thing.
Okay. But let me ask you a question about that. Could that suggest maybe a problem in Roman Catholicism itself?
Possibly, but I don't think so. I think that it's affecting the entire Christian world. If you look at statistics,
different areas of the Christian world are growing in different branches of what's called Christianity. But so I don't think you can determine the truth or falsity necessarily on that. But I'm wondering though, do you think that the decline in people entering seminary, the decline in the priests, the decline, especially in the Western world, could that suggest a problem perhaps in the theology of Roman Catholicism itself?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think the biggest problem that the Roman Catholic Church has right now is all the scandal with all the priests and cover-ups and having a pope that people don't necessarily believe in. You know, I mean, I don't think that's
Okay,
necessarily.
but wait a minute. The scandals predate Francis.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying I think all these things have accumulated and added up in the modern world to people just abandoning the church. That's what I feel that it's happening. It's going on.
You don't think the church abandoned the church at something like Vatican II?
So I do think that the church, in many ways, has abandoned its original principles. I do agree with that.
So how is the Roman Catholic Church still the church if it abandoned the church?
I'm not saying they abandoned it completely. I'm saying they abandoned some of the original principles.
Okay, but how can the Roman Catholic Church still be the official magisterial teaching authority if it abandoned part of that teaching role?
Well, I mean, I guess you have to ask yourself who would take its place.
Well,
I mean, if that's in the tradition. So if we, I mean, I don't guess I understand your question. If we founded the church on Peter and everybody, and there's been a direct line since, if you believe that, obviously Roman Catholics do, then.
Well, I mean, I understand the claims of the papacy. What I'm saying is, on your view.
I'm still here. Sorry, I've got puppies and everything else here. That's why I wasn't trying to come on so quick.
That's fine. That's fine. So right. let me rephrase it this way. So I understand the claims of the papacy, but what I'm saying is that in your view, how is the magisterial teaching office of the church still true and still the case if after Vatican II that living magisterium has abandoned some of its previous ideas?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't really get what you're getting at. I mean, it seems, I guess, just ask a specific question. How about that?
How could I make that question more specific?
I don't know. It's pretty general.
The magisterial teaching office of the church is embodied in the Pope, the papacy, the office of the successors of Peter. And if you believe, and I think it's true, that after Vatican II especially, it's manifest and evident that that teaching authority, that living magisterium, has abandoned some of its previous ideas and teaching and role, then how is that still the magisterial teaching authority?
Because what they are still teaching is still true.
That doesn't make any sense.
I don't know how it couldn't make any sense. So if you've got a degree plan and you take out 10 hours of the credits and you replace it with something else, the degree is still valid, right?
That is a terrible analogy for what the office of the papacy is supposed to be, according to.
I realize that, but your question's so vague. I don't know any other way to sum that up.
The question could not be any more precise. Allow me to state it again. Allow me to state it again. If the church has departed from some of its magisterial teaching at Vatican II, how is that still the church? Because the magisterium presupposes that it's going to continue to teach the same body of doctrines.
Because the church, in large, believes that it's still teaching what it always taught. It still believes that it's teaching the truth.
Okay, so
what I'm saying to you is if that's not true, then what do you replace it with? Because you're basically saying that they're not illegitimate and they should be replaced with something. That's what you're saying.
No.
Are you?
So if the church changed its course materials and decided that Satan was God in the next 10 years, you would still have to be following that because they believe that that's true.
No, because that would be false. That would be illegitimate.
Okay, but you just said that at Vatican II, you do agree.
So here's the thing, right? Illegitimate. Right, here's the thing. All denominations of Christianity have abandoned part of the original teachings. The Roman Catholics aren't exclusive in that matter.
Okay, so then you don't believe Vatican I. Because Vatican I says that the office of the papacy, the Roman Catholic Church, has never abandoned any of its core dogmas, and it will, till the end of the world, maintain that teaching authority and office.
I don't necessarily agree with everything that the Vatican says. I've said that to you. I don't necessarily agree with the current Pope as being a legitimate Pope either.
Isn't it Catholic dogma, though, that you have to accept all the Catholic dogma?
Yes, you're supposed to, yes. That is correct.
So you know what doublethink
You
is?
said you want to have. So here's the thing, right? You said you wanted to have a discussion with me. I said, do you want to have a discussion with me, or you want to have a discussion about what the Roman Catholic Church says? Did we not say that?
Yeah, that's what we're doing.
Okay, and what did you say?
I said a whole bunch.
You said you would do either, right?
Huh?
And you said that we'd do either, right?
Sure.
Okay. Well, that's what we're talking about. So I personally, at this current moment, don't think the Pope's legitimate, and that comes right down to some of the things that are being taught as well.
Okay.
However, the church still believes that everything they teach is legitimate.
But you don't, personally.
No, I don't. I don't think there's a single denomination of Christianity on earth anywhere flat out that teaches the original principles. None. Not yours, not theirs.
Okay. Do you believe? Do you know what doublethink is?
No, doublethink. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You haven't heard that term?
Yeah, I've heard it from 1984.
Yeah. Right. So how is what you're saying not doublethink?
It's not doublethink because I'm telling you what they believe and what I believe, and I don't agree with them. So it's not doublethink.
But
it's a
you're still claiming,
I don't agree with.
To be a Catholic. I mean, you have to not be a Catholic if you're saying what you're saying.
I don't agree with you. See, here's the thing, right? You want to pick things out, right? That Catholics, Roman Catholic,
that's Roman Catholic dogma.
Right. You gonna let me talk? So you've got your concept of what a Roman Catholic has to be, right?
I mean,
just like atheists have an idea of what a Christian has to be.
The dogmas say what it has to be.
The Roman Catholic Church does say what you're saying, right?
Absolutely. Thank you. Right.
And all I'm saying is I don't agree with it, which is why I said at the beginning of this, I'm a little bit out of sorts. I'm out of sort of sync with what the church says. I said that to you.
I appreciate you being honest.
I'm not sure where I'm going with that.
You can't still be a Roman Catholic.
I still call myself a Roman Catholic because I haven't come to something else.
Okay.
You know what I mean, I said that to you.
Right.
It's a breakaway.
Okay. But look, we
can still talk about the Roman Catholic Church because I've been a part of it for 30 years. Okay. And it's not like I don't know what they do and what the practice is. And you said you wanted to talk about Roman Catholic versus Orthodox.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This isn't really a conversation about Orthodox versus Roman Catholic. This is just you trying to attack Roman Catholic and me.
Absolutely.
That's all it is.
It absolutely is. What I mean.
That's all that's happened so far. You haven't once mentioned Orthodox versus Roman Catholic.
Because I want to know what you believe. Why would that be difficult asking you what you believe?
Well, I'm answering you. I mean, I'm just, my beliefs are a little bit they're changing. You know what I mean? I'm looking at new things, which is why I looked at your website.
That's fine. I'm not trying to harass you. I'm just asking you what you believe. And all I'm trying to say is that one of the things because I was Roman Catholic, right? So one of the things that bugged me was the fact that, for example, hold on. So in Mystici Corporis of Pius XII, or in some of the encyclicals of Leo XIII, like Satis Cognitum, you have these very specified statements that to be a Roman Catholic means that you have to accept the whole body of the doctrines. You can't pick and choose. It's not a cafeteria system. So they're very explicit.
And there's almost no Roman Catholic law.
Hold on. Let me finish this part. So they're very explicit in those two encyclicals that to depart in any area of the dogmas means that you're departing from the mystical body. And there's two ways you can do that. You can do that by an explicit rejection of the church, leaving the church, or you can do that by an ipso facto excommunication. So one of the things that's an example of ipso facto would be if I procured an abortion. In Roman Catholicism and the canon law, you automatically are excommunicated if you procure an abortion. And you have to be forgiven, it requires the bishop's approval typically. In a similar way, though, in the canon law, there's also the acceptance of error or heresy explicitly, which is a rejection of any of the dogmas. That removes you ipso facto also from the mystical body. Now, a lot of Roman Catholics don't know that, and they just kind of go along with it anyway. But all I'm trying to say, I'm not trying to be mean to you or rude. I'm just trying to be honest with what I understand the Catholic dogmas to teach back when I was a Catholic. If you disagree or come to positions that are out of accord with the dogmas, you're no longer a Roman Catholic. Even if you go to the services and even if you do this, that, do all the stuff, you're not a Roman Catholic.
So that's all true, but that's not what's in practice in the church, and it never has been.
What do you mean it never has been? Sure.
So as far as divorce goes, it is obviously that's the practice, right? And so is teaching heresy. But what I'm saying is no Roman Catholic, just like no Christian of any other organization, follows their dogma explicitly. Doesn't happen. You know that's not real. I know it's not real. So what's the point of bringing it up? You know what I mean? Obviously, I couldn't have a divorce if I was a Roman Catholic, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're talking major issues, right? Day-to-day stuff, there's loads of things, right, that you will disagree with the Orthodox Church. I'm sure of it.
No,
I don't believe that.
Why would you not believe that?
Well, because you swore at me and all kinds of things just today. I mean, that goes against the Orthodox Church.
I did what?
You swore at me and all sorts of things just since I've met you 2-3 hours ago, and that goes against the Orthodox
I swore
Church.
at you? You mean saying idiot is a swear?
No.
Are you joking or being serious?
No, I'm being serious. I think you swore earlier. But the point is that you do things yourself, you know? What's so funny about that?
Kind of funny.
Why is that funny?
Okay, so everybody sins. Okay, so if you want to say that I'm sinning if I said the word idiot, okay, but that's different than saying, well, I don't agree with the Orthodox teaching on the Trinity, right? I mean,
how do you feel about divorces?
About what?
How do you feel about divorce?
Well, in Orthodox canon law, there is the allowance of divorces. If you read the canons of Saint Basil, which is ironic because it is accepted as a saint in Roman Catholicism, we've always followed the canons of Saint Basil, so there is the separation.
Not always.
Huh?
Not always. Divorce was never a thing, even in Orthodox Church.
Yeah, I'm telling you about it. It's in the canons of Basil.
All right. What about premarital sex?
What about it? I mean, are you asking me, do I agree with the morals of Orthodox?
I'm asking you what the Orthodox Church's dogma on that is, and what is do you agree to it? Do you go abide by it? I mean, because you're asking me a bunch of questions like this, so I'm trying to figure out what we're doing.
Yes, I agree with the morals of the Orthodox Church. Yes, and that would mean that we're not supposed to have. I don't live with my girlfriend, so that's correct.
Right.
Now, do I always live up? Do I never have dirty thoughts about beautiful women? No, I don't always live up.
Well, the reason I'm doing this is because I'm able to like watch your chat and listen to you talk at the same time.
Okay, well, don't do that because they're going to distract you.
It's not distracting me.
It sounds like it.
What?
It sounds like it is.
No, it's not distracting me. The problem is that, you communicate a certain way and you think it's clear and it's not. And you know that what you're asking, right, is vague enough so that no matter what answer I give, you can make it look like
precise about the Roman Catholic dogmas of the papacy. There's nothing vague in anything I said.
Yeah, there is. And the reason why you worded that way is so that you can turn it into an insult and go on. This is why I asked you.
I'm not insulting you. I'm not. How did I insult you?
This whole time has been an insult. This whole thing has been a troll session for you.
I'm not trolling you. I'm asking you serious questions about the papacy. You said
I don't know every time I give an answer.
You said I don't know what debate is. I said you're welcome to come on.
And you've been laughing and making a joke of it the whole time.
What you said was kind of funny. I'm sorry.
It wasn't funny. There was nothing funny about it. I asked you what we're doing, and so you said you wanted to talk about a few things. We agreed to them. You haven't even mentioned them.
You said you do debates for a living. I offered you to come on. I'm asking you honest questions. You're answering. You're being honest.
I'm good. I'm not bothered about it. I'm just saying you said you were going to talk about a few things, and you haven't even mentioned one of them yet.
Dude, I just asked you for 20 minutes about the papacy.
I told you that so here's the thing, right?
So you disagree with the papacy. So thank you. I'm glad that we got to that point. And you asked if I agree with the morals of Orthodoxy. I said yes.
Yeah.
Not being vague.
I guess, but we didn't talk about the church, which is what you said. So
the church is embodied in Peter in Rome.
Hang on.
The church.
Hang on here. So what part of it the Roman Catholics tradition, let's call it a tradition here, of having the Pope is that you disagree with? Do you think that the Roman Catholic Church is not a direct line from Peter, or do you think that there's something scripturally wrong about having a head of the church?
Well, in Orthodox theology, there's the collegiality of the bishops, and so we don't have a problem with saying Peter was the first among equals, but we think there's abundant biblical and post-biblical, post-apostolic evidence that Peter didn't have any extreme super jurisdiction, as would eventually be accorded to him over time as the various traditions of the metropolitans and sees were given higher and higher status at councils. This kind of evolved into a thing where by the time of Charlemagne, the Carolingian papacy, it becomes extreme. And then by unum sanctum in the Middle Ages, you get these declarations that the Pope is basically above all temporal monarchs, and then you have the Great Western Schism, and you've got 3 different guys in France in palaces in Avignon claiming to be the true successors to Peter. We don't think any of that was ever what was intended in the original apostolic succession. And so there were successors to Peter, no doubt. I mean, we have in the Orthodox Church, many of the popes of Rome of the first millennia are saints, but we don't agree with the eventual evolution of this kind of super extreme God emperor position that eventually came about.
Right. I mean, so that's the kind of thing we agree to talk about. So
okay.
I think even within the Roman Catholic Church, that's starting to become a little bit of a shaky issue, which I think is how we wound up with the current Pope. I think that it's more seen as a tradition now, as a scriptural sort of belief. Not sure that I completely agree with it, but I also don't agree that, and I never agreed that the Pope's word was absolute, which you know, as a Roman Catholic, you're definitely supposed to agree with. But you know, I mean, when you talk about the splits, I mean, that's really all it comes down to is you know, what is it about the Orthodox question, which you just answered,
mm-hmm.
You know, and then because as a Roman Catholic, you don't really question sort of the Orthodox having bishops. It's just not a thing, you know what I mean? So
yeah.
The Roman Catholics have the Pope, but they have bishops as well. So it's not a question mark for them. It's a question going the other way. But like right. I said, you answered that. I mean,
right. But we see a lot of the problems that have occurred in the West, and that's not to say that the Orthodox churches don't have problems, but we see a lot of the problems that kind of developed in the West, and the problems that we talked about a little bit in the first 20 or 30 minutes that I think are a result of ultimately the kind of evolution and accretions of the papacy. That's really the source of a lot of the problems in the Western Church. It's not so much a bad guy in the last 10 or 20 years or just Vatican II. I think the problems go back way, way, way older. And when you look at the criticisms of the Eastern Orthodox Church against the West, that's what they've been saying for the last 1,000 years. And I always thought that was a very powerful critique and a very powerful argument that when I was a traditional Catholic and I was very concerned about what was happening after Vatican II, and I was looking back and reading a lot of these medieval Eastern theologians and their debates against the papacy, their debates against the way, they were saying the same stuff 1,000 years ago. You know, if you read St. Photius, mystagogy, you know, he says all the same stuff. He says that the filioque would actually lead to a lot of the problems down the road. St. Gregory of Palamas, when he debated Barlaam, the Western Catholic proponent, he said, your theology is going to lead your church in a certain direction towards atheism. And I think that that's what's happened.
Why do you think that happened? I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I'm trying to figure out how you got to that conclusion.
Well, in the West, there were some acceptances of philosophic doctrines that were already rejected in the East. And so partly because of language, partly because of politics, partly because of erroneous theology, a lot of those influences combined to over time lead the Western Church to adopt ideas that would cause the rise of the papacy, and in a symbiotic relationship, the papacy would then send out missionaries into Orthodox areas to promote the filioque, which had already been by Pope John VIII rejected in being added to the creed. Doesn't matter after that, the Carolingian missionaries were sent out into Orthodox areas. There's a letter of St. Photius where he discusses this extensively. And then over time, this builds into a new kind of theology, breaks out at the Renaissance. The Renaissance is a preeminent example of this, of just intense Platonism. And so really it kind of goes back to Platonism and a kind of secret Hermeticism. And a lot of authors have really documented this. This is why the artwork of the Vatican is so different from the artwork and the aesthetics of the church the first 1,000 years. The church that, for example, the Seventh Council confirmed icons. That was universal for the church at that time. How do we get from that to a bunch of nude sculptures in Rome and in the Vatican by the time of the Renaissance. Well, we get to that through this acceptance of these Platonic, Neoplatonic, and Hermetic doctrines in the West in the Renaissance after the Carolingian and Frankish period. So ultimately, it goes down to a Hellenic philosophic definition of who God is, and a departure from the sole monarchia of the person of the Father in Eastern theology.
Not sure that I follow the thinking. I follow the history, sure enough. By the way, I'm laughing at in your comments there. You got someone says Jay is more Catholic than this guy. Sorry, I thought I mentioned that.
Well, so, Orthodoxy believes that it is the Catholic Church. So, and we believe we're Roman because the Byzantines thought they were Romans. If you were asked a person of the Byzantine Empire, they would say, well,
right.
we're Romans. And then,
Yeah, and that was a split in the empire and language, and that was the real split between the two churches, which is why I'm asking about that. Obviously, I mean, Roman Catholics, from their view, had Peter and the popes from the beginning. The Orthodox don't necessarily. I don't know about that. I guess they don't necessarily believe that, or they don't give it the same importance, I suppose.
Well, we just think that Peter had a role of being first among equals. If you look at Canon 6 of Nicaea, the Council of Nicaea, the sixth canon talks about the different jurisdictions of the important metropolia, or the important sees within the empire. And so it mentions that Rome has a jurisdiction like Antioch. So, Peter set up bishopric in Antioch as well as in Rome. And if you look at somebody like Irenaeus, when Irenaeus talks about the importance of the bishopric of Rome, he doesn't say because there was a divine gift from Jesus to Peter. He says that Rome is doubly apostolic because of Peter and Paul, and that's why every Orthodox icon has Peter and Paul holding the Church of Rome. It's not just Peter and then Paul standing on the shoulders of Peter or something like that. Rather, we see the equality of the apostles, and I think that Nicaea, Canon 6 of Nicaea, clearly reflects that by comparing the jurisdiction of the Bishop of Rome to the other metropolitans and the other sees, which that would make no sense because the Roman Catholics bishops, the Roman bishop's jurisdiction is supposed to be completely universal, and actually it's galactic, isn't it? So
yeah. No, I mean, it's sorry. This time I did get caught up in the chat. First time I got caught up looking at it, I was listening to you though.
That's fine.
Right. So also, I'm gonna more agree with you, right, about the Pope. That's a recent thing for me. Okay. But traditionally, I don't think that I really questioned the position. I don't know that I ever agreed with the Roman Catholic dogma that he kind of is the direct word of Christ. I never found anything in Scripture to directly support that for myself. So I'm good with that, which is why I said we can talk about it. Not really trying to debate some of that, because no matter what the church would say, I'm not necessarily going to agree with some of it. Which is why I just said I wanted to know what you had to say about it.
Yeah, I mean,
I had a notepad before the computer went out of the things we were going to talk about. I know that we were going to talk about sort of the Trinity, as the Baptists call it here, since I'm in Baptist territory. So I don't understand the Orthodox sort of view of it, just of being the power coming directly from the Father. I don't understand how, in your perspective, that changes Scripture. That was kind of one thing I wanted to.
Well, I wouldn't say Scripture, but it is.
That's what I'm saying. I get. Well, that's what I'm saying. I guess what I'm saying is that if sort of like I believe it one way, say I believe that it's all three, and you believe it just comes from the Father, how does that make our beliefs in the Scriptures different? I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
Well, saying that the beginning of the Godhead, or the calling the Father the principal source, arche, or monarchia of the Godhead, doesn't mean that the other three persons don't also fully participate in that, and that there isn't a indwelling of what's called perichoresis, which is just that each person indwells one another. So the Father fully indwells the Son and the Spirit, and vice versa. So it's not to deny that the threeness of God. It's not to deny the unity of God in terms of the common nature, but it is to specify a unique way of beginning our theology, our Trinitarian theology, especially because we don't start with a notion of common essence or common generic unity. And this is what unfortunately would become the norm in Western and scholastic, especially scholastic, medieval scholastic theology. It would, even though at times in medieval theology, in the West, there would be the acknowledgement of the principaliter source of the Father. Typically speaking, it's not given that much importance. What's given the most importance is finding and beginning with the unity of God in terms of the common essence. But common essence is not something that we have any direct perception, knowledge, or notion of. In fact, the unity of God is shown to us, we believe, through the person of the Father. The person of the Father himself is actually the source of unity, because he communicates the divine nature, the singular divine nature, to the Son and to the Spirit. So that's very important for us, because it begins our theology with personhood and not nature, not essentialism. All Platonism starts its philosophy, starts its abstractions from essentialism, from impersonalism. That's Greek thought. That's the way the Greeks did things. So our view is radically different in its starting point, even though at times we can talk about God as the existent being, the supreme essence. That's all fine and good. Many of the church fathers and the Eastern fathers do that, but they're also very explicit, and they stress the fact that we don't, because we say those things, we might say that thing first. But saying something first, or saying something logically first, or saying something chronologically first, does not mean that it therefore has an ontological or metaphysical primacy. It doesn't. So there's not a denial in our theology of the manyness of God, of the three persons. But it's very important not to start the theology with impersonalism and essentialism. It has to start with the person of the Father, precisely because, as St. Basil says very clearly, he says that when God spoke, I am he. And when we talk about God as the one, it is he and not it. So he was contrasting himself to Plotinus, who said that the one is an it. Basil says, no, the one is he. I is a he. I am he, in Exodus 3:14 when he speaks out of the bush.
Yeah, I'm thinking on that as you're talking. I'm thinking of all the different, ramifications of that. It's hard to think about, something that important and try to kind of come up with a conversation right at the same time.
Okay, well, one thing I would say too is that the Trinitarian theology of, ironically, both the East and the West for the first millennium is dominated by the Eastern Fathers. So it's not so much Augustine, and it's not so much Prosper of Aquitaine or any of these later Latin fathers that dominated the theology of the Trinity in the first millennium. It's all the Eastern Fathers, and if you read the councils, they're very clear that the primary emphasis is given to Athanasius, it's given to Basil, it's given to Gregory Nyssa, it's given to the Cappadocians, Gregory Nazianzus. They are the central figures, St. Cyril, for Trinity and Christology. And I'm saying that because Roman Catholics typically they ignore this. They look at, well, that's all settled, I don't have to worry about that. I'm just going to go with, the last 100 years of what the popes have been saying, because that's how we know what's true. And I'm saying that we have a different approach. It's completely different for us. Those Eastern Fathers are given a much more important status and role, and have to be read and understood, because that's why there's a different Trinitarian approach. And even the Vatican clarification on the Filioque of the last couple decades, even that Vatican clarification admits that there is a completely different approach that is still in tension with the West, between East, particularly on the presence of the Spirit and the role of the Father, the procession of the Spirit and the role of the person of the Father. So it's different.
Yeah, I've seen just reading through the papal decrees and stuff like that. I've seen that there has been I don't know necessarily with the current Pope, but the one before, there was a lot of discussion about it. I can remember, I think that they called a special council, and I think they tried to change some things. Obviously, they haven't changed their long-standing dogma, or at least they won't admit that they have. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I remember there being quite a lot of discussion about it. At the time I was in the military and was doing nothing religious whatsoever. So yeah, I don't remember the exact conversation at the time. Mm-hmm. I was in Africa, but I do know I do know that I've looked at it before, sort of the way that the Orthodox view it, and I know how the Roman Catholic views it, and I mean, I suppose from an explaining perspective, it was pretty obvious, just the way to explain it, but trying to apply it to the actual teachings,
Right. I understand.
I couldn't really see, a real difference.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting the way you said, sort of where you start. I mean, I suppose I never really just kind of went back and thought about that in itself. So when it comes to Jesus, how do you think that sort of applies down to him as well?
Well, there's a tendency in the West to be, unfortunately, Nestorian. So the Nestorianism basically said that there's in some way two subjects present in the incarnate Christ. There's a divine Son of God, the Logos, and then there's a human personage or subject that's there. And at times in the Gospels, Nestorius, and I've actually read Nestorius, he says at times we can see two different personages speaking for two different psyches, two different subjects. Now, the problem with this is that on the surface, it may sound like a good way to explain some of the problem text, like, well, what about when Jesus says, he's ignorant of the future? Oh, well, that's the human person, Jesus of Nazareth. What about when he's walking on water? Oh, well, that's the second person of Godhead, the Son of God, speaking through there. So there's like this dual Jesus going on here in Nestorianism. Now, it damaged a lot of the church, but eventually it was condemned and it was refuted by Saint Cyril of Alexandria, because he showed forcefully that no, actually, there's only one soul, there's only one subject, one sole subject present for all the actions of Christ, and that's the second person of the Godhead, the Logos. So there's no human person in Jesus, even though Jesus had a fully human nature. There's absolutely no human person present there. So when we understand that, that's kind of the first step that I took in moving away from Latin theology, because I was so steeped in Augustine, that I was even blind to the dangers that theology, even though we do think he was a holy man, we don't give him the same status that he has in Roman Catholicism. I was blind to the dangers that his approach to soteriology determined in my theology about Jesus, and what it accidentally, not implicitly, but what it accidentally does is that it makes Jesus a determined human person. And then what happens is that the scope of Jesus's redemption, his incarnation, death, burial, resurrection, and the cosmic scope of what he did, it becomes lost because it becomes localized and only relevant to the predestined. Now, again, I don't think that Augustine was intentionally trying to have a bunch of problems, but we don't follow any single church father. Many of the church fathers had erroneous theologies. But I assure you that because of the acceptance of these rough ideas in the West over time, what happens is, not just because of the papacy, but also because of this, there's an incorrect Christology that's developed. And if you look at the Sixth Council, I think the Roman Catholic Church absolutely departs, even though they confess the Sixth Council, they absolutely depart from the Christology of the Sixth Council, because it teaches that there's a distinction between God's essence and God's energy, and that the humanity of Christ participates in those uncreated divine energies. And that's actually how we're saved. And you can follow the logic of that argument from St. Cyril at Ephesus all the way up to the Sixth Council. So there's a similar argument, because what happens to Christ applies to the body of the church, and it also applies to the Eucharist and to the sacraments. If there's no uncreated divine energies present in the Eucharist, then we're not being deified. We're not participating in Christ's deified humanity. Those councils have basically already settled this matter, and that's what I would say is the chief difference in the Christology. And then, so then when you get to the Roman Catholic Church, over the centuries, you get these really strange things like heart worship, and you get of the Middle Ages, and you get the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and you get the created grace debates after Trent, and all this weird stuff that is really foreign to what's very clear in the Christology of the Sixth Council.
That's interesting to me. I don't know if I can get behind he has no human element part. I'm trying to reconcile it in my mind while you're talking.
I didn't say he had no human element. I said he has a fully human nature, body, soul, and rational mind.
Okay.
But he is not a human person.
Right. See, I mean, because of the resurrection and a few other things, I don't know that I don't see how you square that part. How can he die per se for the resurrection to happen if he's not human? Or I mean, I know you're saying he is, but I don't get the
suffers
distinction there.
that death in his human nature. But the divinity, as all the fathers teach, is impassible. So God himself is impassible in his nature. He doesn't change. The divine nature is absolutely unchanging. But the persons of the Godhead can enter into a tropos, or a mode of being within history, within time and space, that's different than they were before. So, for example, Jesus wasn't incarnate in human nature prior to his birth, right? So the Father didn't become incarnate, the Trinity didn't become incarnate. It was only the second person of the Godhead that became incarnate. So he entered into a way of being, a mode of being that had never existed before. So there is that possibility, whatever you believe, if you believe in the incarnation. And so when he entered into that mode of being, all we are saying is, which is what Ephesus says very clearly, is that he assumed a fully human nature, and it's the same nature that you have, that I have. It's common to all humans, and that's why we're all going to be resurrected, is because we all share the nature that Christ has. Now, the unique aspect of Christ is that even though he's common in his humanity with all of us, he shares the same nature that we all have. We're all linked to him in some special mystical way. He includes all human nature within his singular incarnate hypostasis, okay, his singular incarnate person. So he's one guy walking around with one body, but that body is linked to all human beings, and that is the only reason Paul says all men are going to be resurrected. Even the wicked are only resurrected on the basis of Christ assuming their nature. So it's a question of how we are going to participate in Christ, because everybody's going to participate in some way, either in terms of ever well-being or ever ill-being, and that's determined by how we live in this life. So if we live in this life according to God's law and participate in theosis, or deification, and we participate in those uncreated energies, then we participate, therefore, in his deified humanity. So I'm not at all saying that he's not human. He's fully human, but he's not a human person.
Right. Okay. I think I can agree with that.
The only person there, and Rome actually technically confesses this. They technically confess to not being a Nestorian, even though I think that unfortunately a lot of their theology is Nestorian and they don't recognize it.
I think that I would agree with that, in the same sense that an angel is never a human. Even if they are here with us, they're still an angel. I would say that probably I get that.
There's a distinction in Orthodox theology between nature and person, and I think that's what's kind of get confusing here, is because like between you and me, like you and I have a common nature. We share human nature, but you're the person Clay, and I'm the person Jay. So what makes us distinct is personhood, and what we share in common is nature. And so, as the Eastern Fathers say very clearly, that's the same with God, except that God's not distinct, separate persons in terms of spatial relations. But the Father, the Son, and the Spirit are three persons that share one common nature.
So do you think that Jesus was self-aware of what he really was?
Absolutely. And that's what I'm saying, is that the reason
from the beginning.
Absolutely. The reason I'm saying this is that the only person there, the only subject, the only person is the divine Son of God, the second person of the Godhead. So there was never a point in Jesus' life where he doubted. There was never a point where he didn't know who he was, where he wasn't omniscient. And the mystery of the incarnation, as the Eastern Fathers are very clear, is that they say that even in his limitations, the only ways that he could die or experience death in his human nature was because he willed to do so. If you think about it, Jesus himself even explains this to Pilate when he says to Pilate, "You would have no power over me unless it were given to you." And then he later says, "I lay down my life of my own will." So it's not taken from him. He's never doubting the Father. He's never in any way unsure of what's going to happen. And this is why later on St. Maximus in the Sixth Council would specify that he has no gnomic will, G-N-O-M-I-C. And all that means is that he wasn't in a conflicting, doubting, unsure will, because he didn't have a fallen will like we do.
So I'm not sure if I'm agreeing with you on that. I was just looking up a few scriptures while we were talking there, just trying to, reconcile this belief that he learned his true nature at the age of 33. You often hear that repeated.
Wait, say that again.
Well, it's often repeated in different denominations of Christianity and Catholics, is that he learned his true nature at the age of 33.
No, that's nowhere.
I was trying to find.
That's called adoptionism. That's called adoptionism, which is the heresy that would eventually be the Arians, and it would eventually be Nestorianism.
Yeah, I was looking for the scripture that matched that. It wasn't something I'd really concerned myself with until we just had this conversation here. But I'm not finding the scripture, but at the same time, I'm not finding a scripture to exactly match what you're saying either. Where do you remember where the descriptions of sort of his nature and or any kind of scripture that would sort of support what you were just saying?
Well, sure. I mean, in Colossians, in like Colossians 1, 2, and 3, in Hebrews 1. I mean, the texts are John 1. The texts are very clear that Jesus is just as divine as the Father. Jesus says, "I and the Father are one." As the Father has life in Himself, so He's given to the Son to have life in Himself. He is the exact expression of the Father's. He is the exact icon in the Greek of the Father's nature. In His hypostasis, He's the exact representation of the Father. Hebrews 1, Colossians 1, 2. I mean, so this is everywhere in the New Testament. Not even in the New Testament. It's also in the Old Testament.
I suppose to me that's quite similar to our own nature. We were created in His image as well. So I'm just trying to.
Well, can I say something with that? I don't want to offend you when I say this, but
no, you won't.
This is the gospel. This is what the gospel is, and so I think it's scary that as a Roman Catholic, you're not taught. I'm not faulting you. I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm just saying that it's a sad thing that the catechesis of the Roman Catholic Church can't impart what is kind of like pretty important stuff.
No, I get that. No, I agree with that. It's not that. It's just that I think that Roman Catholics in general don't believe that he was self-aware from the very beginning. I don't think in the end he clearly knew. So by the time he was crucified, resurrected.
Well, I can already tell you that technically Roman Catholics do confess that Jesus was fully divine, and that he didn't learn that at a point in time. Now, some Roman Catholic theologians are not as clear on that or don't believe that. But the official teaching of the Roman Catholic Church, technically speaking, yes, they do believe that Jesus was always divine, and they reject any form of Nestorianism.
Yeah, no, I agree that he was divine from day one. I guess for me, it makes a difference if he knew of his own nature from the beginning, because it changes a lot about the way that the people around him would have reacted to him, and his teachings would have been different, for example, at the early times, because we have all the accounts after he had already had the apostles, but we don't really have anything before that. And so I think that, a lot of probably younger people wonder about him in his youth and what he would have been like. In my mind, he would have been just like any other kid or any other, person in the way he behaved.
No. See, yeah. So we don't believe that at all. Mm-mm.
So you think even as a child, he was speaking the word, to say?
Yeah. The only, I mean, that's part of the mystery of the incarnation is God becomes an infant, and there's no human person ever present in Christ.
I agree with that. Go ahead.
I recommend an easy read that you would find advantageous, and called Two Paths by Michael Welton. I think this book would be right up your alley. I mean, you could easily read it in a few days. It's not that long, but it's a good introductory kind of overview of our two different paths in between Rome and Orthodoxy. Because I think that a lot of what you are saying, it kind of sounds like you already kind of like some of the things that Orthodoxy says.
No, I do. I mean, I said that's what I was trying to tell you. I don't.
Right.
I'm not dedicated one way or the other at the moment. I'm trying to figure out what I think about it all. But at one time I wasn't like that. You know what I mean? But that's changed. So
yeah.
I'm just trying to think of Jesus as, say, a 10-year-old. All right. I'm trying to imagine sort of what that would be like. And it may not seem important to you, but it seems real important to me, because at some point in time, people would have started following him. You know what I mean? It's not like I guess what I'm trying to say is, it wasn't like he was born and people just believed that they had to follow him from the beginning, although it was announced. I get, people followed him because of what he said and what he did through his acts, not just because of who he was, if you follow me. So I'm trying to, when you look at the scripture, it doesn't really talk about that. And
okay, but I mean, I would say that if we're not told what was going on for that time period, then in God's providence, it probably wasn't that important for us. There's a reason why, Christ didn't providentially allow there to be revelation of what was going on when he was in his teenage years or whatever. I mean, we do have revelation of him being young and he was, when he was still a child, still a kid, roughly, he was debating with the Pharisees and teaching them and refuting them from the law. They were shocked that he, was being so young, could argue the points of the law as he did. Now we know why that is, because he gave the law. So
right.
That child that was present there is the one who gave the law. So
how do you think that he was when that occurred?
I think it says in Luke.
You're 20, right?
I think it says in Luke when he did that, what his age was. Off the top of my head, I'm trying to remember, was he like 11, 10, 11 or something like that? Let me see.
No, I mean, there's a reason why I'm asking all this. It's not just random. I'm thinking of the age of consent, and different things that, So, for example, you baptize anybody, basically, in Orthodox. I mean, there's no real age restriction there or anything. Whereas in Roman
Catholics and Orthodox baptize infants. So is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, yeah, but I just, you have your coming of age ceremony and everything. And a lot of that's related to sort of hitting adulthood. And I'm just trying to reconcile in my mind how that lines up with that part of the belief. Because it's certainly something you would, I agree with you. It's not important to the actual scripture and learning what we're supposed to do, but at the same time, we had Jesus and he was here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he went through childhood. I mean, he didn't have to go through childhood. He went through childhood and.
Well, no, actually, the purpose that he came was to redeem us as humans, and in order to do that, he lived through every stage of human life. So, the fact that Christ became incarnate as a child is the means by which children can be redeemed. And it's called recapitulation. The Eastern Fathers are very clear about this, and that's why he lived through all the stages of childhood all the way up to adult, was to redeem the people who were children all the way up to adult.
Right. Yeah, I'm just thinking about it. Let me just do a real quick look at your 2-pass book here real quick. You said Michael Wheaton, right? Welton, yeah. Yeah, it says Jesus. I'm kind of watching your comments there. I haven't been paying attention to them, but so people know I'm not trying to debate Jay. That was the whole problem I had with the description to begin with. I'm trying to ask him what he sees the differences and how he thinks they're important, and try to understand his perspective. I don't really have any interest in debating someone on theology. If someone wants to talk to me and teach me things, that's fine. I'll listen. A lot of people are over here in the comments think I do know these things, by the way, people. I keep it to myself because it's part of my nature.
Okay.
There's been a lot of things Jay said I didn't know about. So I'm not going to say I knew it all, but most of what he's talking about, also the general concepts, I do know.
Okay.
I think the point of us having a discussion is so that, you can sit down and think about what the difference is, because like I caught part of your Islam talk, which was really interesting, because I don't know a great deal about Islam. I mean, I know a little, let's say that, but not a lot. And it breaks down people. You don't even know the gospel. I do know people. I do know. But it breaks down the splits and when things happen. But when you're at a crossroads in your life and you're trying to form a whole new,
right, which was why I was willing to chat with you. That's fine.
Yeah, so I'm not trying to claim anything as a certain way. I'm trying to see where the split is and how it happened, and yes, I came to chat with him.
Okay.
And so that's why I said it might not be interesting for your guest if I'm just listening to you talk. I mean, there's things I could debate, but I mean, I don't see the point.
Well, I told you it doesn't have to be a debate. We can do whatever you want. I'll let my people that come on, I'll let them decide how they want to do it. They want to do it formal. They want to do it conversational. I don't care either way. Now, so we do have a lot of super chats kind of lined up. So let me read some of those.
Yeah, I didn't say it. I would have said something to you.
Yeah. So we got.
So people know while you're looking up your super chats real quick. I don't normally do theological discussions with anyone. That's what I was saying at the beginning. I do monastic practice. It's private to me.
Okay.
Well, you're on it, and it's good. And the point was that I saw you speaking about it and knew for certain that it was someone who could talk about it. I mean, that wouldn't like have to, carry on like Warski and stuff, which is what I was saying. It's, I didn't want that. I don't have any interest in that. Nobody learned. You two that were talking that time might have learned something, but I wouldn't have. So,
all right, let me read.
Yeah,
let me read a few of these. Want $5.
Yeah, I was just catch your super chats real quick.
Is Christos Yanaris a good theologian in your opinion? I've read some of his essays, and I think the couple essays that I read weren't that bad. But I've heard that he has some kind of modernist influences, so I would be a little weary of Yanaris. Simon the Pie Man, $10. Thanks for all you share. Thank you, Simon. Appreciate that. Sean Hutchison, $2. Are there any hetero Novus Ordo priests? I would say it's about 50 to 50. I've heard, even Roman Catholics tell me that it's probably 50-50 in the US, maybe 60-40. MC, $2. Thank you, MC. Randy Churchill, $20. Thank you, Jay. Always good content. Well, thank you, Randy Churchill. That was a big, fat, nice little super chat there. Tanner Terry, $5. Keep your patience, Jay. I think we've been pretty patient. I could always probably be more patient, but thank you, Tanner. Elias Callisto, $2. What are your thoughts on Dr. Taylor Marshall? There's always the open floor if he wants to debate. I debated him in comments, I think on his blog 10 years ago. It was either my blog or his blog 10 years ago on the Essence Energy Distinction. And as I've said many times, Dr. Marshall thinks that because St. John Damascus in one place says that God's energy is single, that therefore he's teaching absolute divine simplicity. Of course, anyone who's actually read in its entirety on the Orthodox faith, Defense of the Orthodox faith, knows that that is absurd. And even within book 1, he also says the energies are manifold. So that's very deceptive on the part of Dr. Taylor Marshall. I don't anticipate him wanting to debate me anytime soon. But if he wants to, he's always welcome on. Kentucky is better, $2. Ask Clayton to refute orthodoxy. I don't think he would be interested in refuting orthodoxy. He's, as he says, just wanting to chat. Is that right? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, I'm not going to refute. I'm not to that. And by the way, this isn't my normal room, Chip. I got caught up in a thing. So super chat.
Alexander, $2. After the American Empire, can Russia rise up? We don't know what's going to happen in history. I think that there's always a potential for something like that. But I wouldn't put my trust in any single nation or any politics. I would not. God could providentially raise up any political system that he wants to, but I wouldn't put my hope in princes, as Scripture says. M Film Trip, $5. What's your opinion on Florovsky? I have a very high view of Florovsky. In fact, as it comes to modern Orthodox theologians, typically Lasky, Florovsky, Staniloy, Larche, those guys are all pretty solid, pretty good guys. If you're wanting to read modern guys, of course, I always say read the Church Fathers, but no, I think Florovsky is really good. He's always very deep, very scholarly. and only topped by Father Staniela. Of course, you can also read Justin Popovich, another good one. Don't forget Father Justin. He's also solid. Let's see. Tanner Terry, $5. Phenomenal display of patience. Oh, thank you, Tanner. Scott Morris, $8.88. Do we worship the flesh of Christ? And if so, how do we reconcile this with the fact that his flesh is created? Yes, this is discussed I have an essay on this actually because it's discussed at Ephesus. This is an argument that St. Cyril uses against Nestorius because he says, Nestorius, do you believe in the real presence? And if you do, he says, then you worship a creature. Because as St. Cyril says, we do not, in believing in the real presence, he says, we do not worship the flesh of some mere man, but in fact, we are honoring the flesh of the God-man. So we do worship the flesh, but we not worship the flesh as flesh. We worship it as the flesh of the God-man. So our honor and our adoration is always directed to one Christ in both natures. That is St. Cyril's forceful argument against Nestorius. And if you follow the logic of that argument, it then consistently leads to the Sixth Council and the uncreated energies deifying Christ. And that's how we understand the Eucharist. The uncreated energies are there present, transforming the bread and wine. So good question, though, Scott. But look up my essay. If you look at my essay on St. Cyril, and I think I mentioned this in my critique of Rushdoony, because Rushdoony makes a Nestorian statement. So if you look that up, you'll see the way that Ephesus directly answers Nestorius, citing Cyril on that very point. Tanner Terry, $2. Clayton, tell us what you believe the gospel is.
No. Flat out, no. I told you I keep that stuff private.
Okay. Well, what about where Jesus says you have to confess sin before men?
No, I agree. I mean, I know that. It's because it's going to lead to 50 million other questions is why.
Not a verse, $5. If the Orthodox Church knows that we are born innocent and pure, well, first of all, we don't believe that. Because while we all inherited Adam's flawless human act, we did not inherit his guilt. Well, we don't think that we're born flawless and pure. We haven't committed personal sins yet because we're infants, but that doesn't mean that we are pure. So it depends on what we mean by flawless and pure. So we don't necessarily have the Augustinian conception of the personal guilt of Adam attributed to the infants, which thereby damns every infant. Orthodoxy has never taught that. But we do believe that there is the deprivation of theosis as a result of Adam's fall. Infants are in a corrupt and mortal state, and they do lack theosis, but we don't make the harsh doctrine of early medieval Roman Catholicism and Augustine, which he's unique to this, to say that all infants are therefore damned. But that does not mean that we are Pelagian or semi-Pelagian. In fact, that's condemned. But we do not believe in inherited guilt per se. We do believe in deprivation of grace and ancestral sin. So there are some specified points of departure from the Augustinian doctrine, and that's why you will see that the Eastern Fathers do not teach the hardcore Augustinian view, and they don't damn all damned infants. Not a verse, 199. I did not say we were born flawless. Okay, well, you said that born innocent and pure because, okay, so I'm not, if you want to read what, okay, look, if you have an Orthodox study Bible, there's a whole page on what ancestral sin is in the book of Romans. So you could go to that. So I'm not going to quibble with you. I appreciate your super chat. I'm not going to quibble with you over innocent versus flawless versus pure, because again, it's not that different of a doctrine. But it is a little bit different from hardcore Augustinianism. And isn't it interesting, too, that in Roman Catholicism, they actually came up with a limbo of infants to sort of soften that Augustinian doctrine that all unbaptized infants are damned. I mean, come on, this is ridiculous. But it is, by the way, possible for infants not to all be damned because of the fact that Christ's incarnation reaches all. The assumption of human nature affects all. Alexander 199, can we know anything of Antichrist? Sure. There's a great little treatise put out by Holy Trinity Monastery that's pretty well known. Apostasy and Antichrist. I recommend this. It's a good treatise. So that's pretty much, it's just a collection of what the fathers have said on it. So I would recommend that. I don't see any more super chats. Have you got anything else you want to add, Clayton?
Yeah, I was going to talk to you to something, just
sure.
Your opinion, our opinion, something that I more often talk about. Islam, is spreading across all of Western Europe, in America as well.
Mm-hmm.
From your view, what can we do about that?
Well, I don't know that there's a whole lot we can do in terms of like politics. I have no hope in any political power or leaders to change that kind of stuff, because the top global elites want to rearrange the nations, and Wesley Clark and the EU and all that. They say they want to completely change the landscape of Europe, and they want to do the same thing in the US. So I think that the problem lies in the fact that we don't recognize that our own rulers are the actual wicked people. It's not the people over there. It's our rulers that are behind all this. And most of the public they're kind of starting to figure that out, but everybody's duped into thinking that politics can solve things. So I don't think much could be done to stop that. I think that we are receiving the chastisement that we deserve for our acceptance of all this degeneracy. And therefore, as is the case all throughout the Old Testament, when God's people are not faithful to his law and not faithful to him, they are ruled over by others. And so I think that we will be chastised and ruled over by others like Islam.
Right. So, because that's one of the things, I've spoke, part of lateralism is that you don't allow it on the basis of Sharia law, because originally in the Constitution, it doesn't allow for, maybe not the Constitution, but when the founders were writing the Constitution, they didn't allow for religious systems that included a political element, which is why when we first founded the country, Islam wasn't protected at all. It wasn't even, Muslims weren't even allowed into the country for probably 160 years. Jews were, but they were never protected under, in courts. And so one of the things, that you try to bring it up now, just mentioning going back to that, even mentioning the laws and things, and now it gets censored. But I think what we're facing is that Christians are becoming censored.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a problem. And that's the reason I asked you about it, because I think that even discussions like this can get you banned. I've had a lot of friends that, have been banned for talking about religion. They normally claim that they're, alt-right or white nationalists, but a lot of them don't have anything to do with any of that, and I'm starting to see it a lot. And I was kind of wondering, I mean, it's easy to say we do nothing, we just follow our faith. But like in America, for example, our faith, or at least the numbers are decreasing every year. And I don't think that as Christians, we're meant to just sit back and let it happen. I don't believe that's the case.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, I'm not part of the normal evangelical American sphere of what constitutes Americanism and American Christianity. So I can't speak to that. I mean, I'm interested in promoting orthodoxy, but I'm not interested in any kind of political movements or trying to politics. So
yeah,
if people want to check out your stuff, I do have your link. I will alter the description of this video to be more accurate in terms of what we ended up discussing. I'll have a link to your lateralism. People can go check out your philosophy of lateralism if they want to. I'll have that below. But Tanner Terry, one more. Jay, would you do an outline of the recapitulation theory of atonement for Clayton? 1 Peter 3:15. Well, I have some essays that I might send Peter later, but I don't know if we're going to do a whole recapitulation of that right now. But it's getting a little late. I do thank Clayton for coming on. I think we had an interesting talk. It was not the talk that I expected, and that was cool. So I'm glad that we aren't on bad terms and we aren't arguing here. So
thanks for inviting me. And the next time, I'll have it all worked out. You know,
That's
and we
fine.
just kind of twittered and then we went to a thing, but I'll have it worked out. We can talk again sometime and actually have a, you know, a more meaningful structured discussion that, because as it is, I was kind of listening to you and learning from you, which is what I intended to do, but I don't think you intended to do. So, you know, we can
No, that's
do
okay.
something more meaningful.
Like I said, I'm fine with whatever kind of debate people want to do. But thank you for coming on. We've been going for a while now, but so I will bid you adieu. God bless, and I think if you check out that book, you might like it. It might be right up your alley for where you're at.
Yeah.
All right, cool, man.
Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody. That was an interesting chat. Thank you to Clayton for coming on. Didn't go the way I expected, but we had a good talk. I'm glad he was open to hearing our views. And by the way, I'm not opposed to having people on for those kinds of Q&As. It's just that hardly anybody ever wants to do that, or they don't ever reach out to me to say, hey, have me on. Let me talk to you about this. So some of these people were saying it was ridiculous. So the way